So we are recording. So welcome. Today we're going to do 2.5 Geeks with Dale and Doug. We're going to chat about and with AI. And as Dale pointed out earlier, the double D's are in the house. That's awesome. And so for those folks who don't know Dale, he's got 25 years of experience in IT with a current focus on automation, observability, and logging. He has a blog, so if you want to check that out. And he leverages various tools like AI and ChatGPT and Ollama. He's much more into the local stuff, bringing down local LLMs and doing that kind of stuff than I am. He reached out to me, I guess, a year ago, last year sometime, and he was heading off to Vegas to participate in the contest at his company. And he wanted to show me what he did with the PowerShell AI early module that I had. And he did some really cool stuff and wired it up into a UI and whatnot, all PowerShell based. And unfortunately, he came in second in the contest, only because the other group in his company did some more interesting things, I guess, but had a bigger team and more budget, whatnot. So, and then recently just said, hey, we should get together and just chat, because he's got a definitely different angle and view on these things, which I like to hear about, figured to share with the community. And before we kick into that, so I just wanted to do a little housekeeping. I'll drop my YouTube channel in. So today's recording will be here. So for those who have not subscribed to my channel, subscribe there. I put these YouTube videos up there. I also do other videos, and I just put up a couple this week. And if you subscribe, you'll get notified when I put them and publish them out. So, and I publish everything on PowerShell or AI or other cool tools that fit into the command line or other technologies. So if that interests you, head over there. So before we get to Dale, so tomorrow I'm going to be doing my first fee-based, so it costs money. So that's going to leave out folks like I see Steve Judd's on the line. So it's going to leave Steve Judd out of this tomorrow. But if you want to come, I'm going to show you how to unlock the potential of OpenAI by connecting your PowerShell to external tools using OpenAI and PowerShell and what they call function calling. And I'm going to demo that. So if you're interested in that, I'm not going to publish the video from tomorrow. That's for the folks who join. And I'm also not going to be publishing the module that does this. It's separate from my PSAI module. I'll be handing that out to folks who paid and joined. And just as a note, this morning, I guess I put on the socials that a new PSAI module I dropped today, 0.2, and that has all the latest and greatest stuff from the AI people, from the OpenAI folks, including vector spaces, search tools, controlling how much token usage you have, and on and on and on. So keeping up with what they're doing, and I expect a big drop in November and a bunch of stuff between now and then. So let's do a quick little demo. So as we get into this, I'm going to be doing something called, we're going to work with YouTube, and we're going to use a YouTube scraping module that can go after transcripts. I'm saving my spare change for stickers to hand out. There you go. Steve's going to hand out stickers and use his money that way. That's a good return on investment. I like that. Why do you got to like me like that? Hey, Steve, sometimes we got to do what we got to do. So I'm going to use this PSM1 mod, this PSM1 YouTube scraping, and this was on the line right now is Pete Cook. And over the last, I don't know how long, we started chatting on X and whatnot, and he's another person that I'd love to get on and do a 2.5 Geeks with. He has another different perspective on all this stuff and what he finds and whatnot, and we share that back and forth. And we came across this guy independently who created something called Fabric in Python, and it's a way to organize your prompts. It's really cool, and he makes it so that you can pipe, your basic prompt into a bigger prompt, and then you can actually chain your prompts. Stuff we do in PowerShell in terms of piping objects from dir, and then we pipe it into something that munges that, and then we can do further stuff like setting the files and whatnot. So I saw that, and I created something called PSWeave that's publicly available. It mirrors a lot of what this other person did with Fabric, and we shared our prompts back and forth. I might have put a video up on that. And anyway, so a few weeks ago, Pete said, he went back and looked at that, and he was saying there's one piece about doing YouTube, getting YouTube transcripts and doing things with it. And I was like, yeah, I saw when he did that, and I've been trying to, I every once in a while put my toe in the water and try to figure out how to grab the YouTube transcripts, either using their API or scraping. And I don't have no time for this. Anyway, Pete, like a pit bull on a rabbit, he went down that route, and he figured out how to make it work, and he came up with a PowerShell module. I don't think he's published it yet, and but we'll show it here in action. So let's just take this. So basically, there's a key function. It's called get transcript. You pass a video ID, and it uses a bunch of other functions to grab the page, grab the pieces you need, and then he comes back and gives you a response. So here's a video I did. So let's see what happens. I'm just going to run this up. And it went out and it grabbed a transcript from one of the videos I posted. And the video was about an explain function I have with PowerShell and AI. So it's only about a 3-minute video. Yep. And it grabs the transcript that YouTube generates when you post a video there. Awesome stuff. So, of course, this was all in the context of, well, how can we make this work with AI? So, and based on also what I guess his name is David, did that. Thank you, Clem. That's the guy. Yep, that's exactly the fabric. That's what's his Daniel. So Daniel and I have actually had conversations. We shared prompts. He put his in, some of mine in his. I took some of his in mine. And because, Python's been around for 100 years, they already have these kinds of things about getting videos. So if you notice the signature of the function for get transcript, right? Now, just as a note, I'm going to be demoing this and much more about agents in PowerShell and AI tomorrow. So if you're interested, definitely sign up. Unless, of course, you're getting stickers to hand out and you want to do that. So a signature of a function in PowerShell is the name of the actual function and the parameters and their types. And what's interesting is that you can now use function calling in OpenAI LLMs, and other ones are doing this. Anthropic's coming online with this, as well as Gemini. So by coming up with a particular type of structure, a JSON structure about how to describe these, you can pass that off to the model, and it becomes part of your prompt. And you can do it under the covers, so it doesn't really impact how you see it or know about it, as well as your users. So let's take a look at how that works. But first, Pete's stuff is great, right? But it takes a video ID, right? So if I actually take a video ID and I set it to a URL pointing to YouTube, it goes out, tries to find it. It can't find it because there's no logic in the get transcript that actually pulls that apart and grabs just the ID, right? Additionally, if I pass in an array, so if I pass in the URL and if I pass in just an ID, it'll try the first one, but it doesn't try the second one. So that's fine, right? This is like a version 1 of scraping. Now, if I wanted to, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat here to solve this, right? I could go and make a PR on Pete's repo, and I could add this to be a string, and then in here I can check and see if it's a URL or not. If it's a URL, I can pull off the ID. I could do a bunch of different things. I could also put the looping logic in here. Okay, so if I get more than one, process each. Or I could do that all here in my code. I could wrap the get transcript. I can make my own function called get transcript ex. And I can put all that logic in mine, and then that would be good for me. But we're going to take that, we're going to kick that up a notch. And yeah, check out Pete's repo. He's got it up there. He just posted it in the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an agent. So there's a lot of research that's been done in the last year plus by Hugging Face and so on, and Andrew Ng and Microsoft. There are tools out there like LangChain, Baby GPT, AutoGPT, AutoGen. You might have heard of Semantic Kernel out of Microsoft. And using and building agents, while it's all this stuff is began as research, because it's like, how do you get LLMs to reduce hallucinations, get better responses and whatnot? And it's looking like agent technology is the way. So what I have been doing is looking at a whole bunch of different frameworks like Crew AI, LangChain, LangGraph, all written in Python, and going, wow, these are really cool concepts. And I think I can reproduce a lot of it because it's only Python code. There's no special libraries they're using inside of them to make the magic happen. And that magic I saw as doable in PowerShell. So what I'm going to do, here's the special sauce. I'm going to take Pete's get transcript, right? I'm not doing anything to it. I'm not modifying it. I'm not updating it. I'm not wrapping it. I'm just taking the function name and the different parameters. So this can work with any one of your functions that you have. And tomorrow will demo a bunch of those. And I say register tool, and I create a new agent, and it's that simple. Now, if I type it out agent, right, it shows this is what a tool looks like when it gets set up and ready to be passed into the function calling. And that's all there is to it. Now, and you don't have to know anything. You can just register your tool, the name of your function, you're good to go. So let's see how that works. So now, rather than just getting a dump of the transcript, I'm going to take agent and I'm going to pipe it that get agent response. And I'm going to give it the prompt, summarize this video ID. And I want 5 bullets, 10 words each. Now you'll see a little blink there. It downloaded the transcript. And so the agent, so what happened is that this prompt went to AI. It was that the agent was set up with the get transcript defined. Or registered. And then AI figured out, oh, this is a YouTube ID because it's looked at billions of lines of code and whatnot. And yes, you can spoof that or whatever you want to do and make it fail. And it figured out that that was an ID, knew how to call the get transcript that was registered, got the transcript, and then did the 5 bullets, 10 words each. Now I'm going to turn on show tool calls, which is super cool it's not fully for debugging, but you can see what happens. And I'm going to run this one up again. And then we should see a verbose. There we go. So that's actually what the summarize this ID, 5 bullets, that went up first. And then what AI did was pass back to my PowerShell functions, my agent technology, and said, oh, you need to call get transcript. And sure enough, there you go. It tells me what to call. It plugs in the parameters that I want, and then I call get transcript. Now, this brings into focus the things like, defensive coding, right? You don't want to be able to get data that's going to come back and be damaging. So you have to do more work inside of something like a get transcript to protect what's going on. But again, it's not figuring out how to send a string like a SQL injection attack into that ID. So I can either do this manually, and then I could do the get transcript up top, get the transcript, copy paste it, or pipe it into another PowerShell function that then does everything. But this is one way to use the agent. The next way is, notice in here, I'm doing the same thing. Instead of getting 5 bullets, I want to get 3 bullets, but I'm also passing in the URL, and I'm passing in an ID straight away. We'll run that up, and it tells, you can see it goes up. So it figured out from the second one that it was a URL, grabbed it, told the underlying agent that you need to call get transcript with that. Off it goes. And it comes back and it summarized both of those videos. And the first one was on the PowerShell AI module, which is correct. And the second was based on a regex wizard that I did a video on about using custom GPTs. So this has begun to show some really interesting promise. And tomorrow I will take this, go deeper, show you how to easily register the tools, show you how to do more than one, and do all kinds of other cool pieces. So if this interests you, great. And as a final note, folks like Andrew Ng, who created Google Mind, which became, I think it's called Deep Brain now. He also went on to create deep learning. He's a co-founder of Coursera company. He's one of the top ML, AI, Gen AI people. He's been doing a circuit and talking about agents for the last few months at Stanford and Wharton and whatnot and MIT. And it's showing that if you use GPT 3.5 and you just give it a prompt, like summarize this piece or do this kind of an activity, you have a chance of like a 56 to 60% good response, depending on the complexity of your prompt. If you use GPT-4, that goes up to 70. But if you start using these agent technologies and function calling, GPT 3.5, which is the cheaper, less exact way, can then begin to do things like get to a 80% and more response that you want, and reduces hallucinations amazingly. The other thing that I found by building these tools and experimenting with them is that even if the underlying pieces start getting wrong information, GPT will then ask for the original agent that it passed it to redo it. And I'm not doing any programming. Again, I'm not sitting here behind the scenes and doing a loop over this. I'm not parsing out the ID. It's AI's figuring that out and then doing what it looks like is the right thing. So tomorrow's the day. If you want to come, glad to have you. So let's move on to what we're going to do today. Dale, I think we're ready to chat. If you're ready to chat.
Sure.
Well, welcome. So any particular place you'd like to start?
Not really. I'll let that up to you.
Okay. So yeah, do you want to talk about like what got you into looking at AI and what got us talking?
Sure. So for me, I'm a big fan of PowerShell. So I knew about Doug for many years. Every time you go and search for sample code and stuff, you'd always see Doug's name. And I listened to the PowerShell podcast that Andrew Plow does every week. And about a year ago, he did a Gainesville PowerShell user group, and Doug was going to demo his one of the very early versions, probably, of his PSAI, and so I joined that PowerShell group and watched his demo and seen how easy he made it, that you could just do a couple little calls with some commands that he created and send questions out to ChatGPT and get answers. And when I seen that, my light bulbs kind of went off, because I was going to, he kind of mentioned it early in the video, to a conference in Vegas. And part of that conference, they were having a hackathon, and they were going to do some AI as the topic for the hackathon. So I work with automation all the time, and this product that I work with, it's called ARIA Automation. You can create these custom forms, and you can send data from these custom forms, and I could even demo it if we want to scripts. And when I seen Doug's demo at the Gainesville PowerShell, I'm like, man, I could just do that on the back end, take what's inputted on this custom form, sent it to his script, which goes out to ChatGPT and brings stuff back. So I got that working. And what I wanted to demo was, if you're an automation person and you want to connect, I work with the VMware products a lot. So if you want to connect to their vCenter and get every VM that has snapshots or different things, to use the PowerCLI module, so I would ask these questions and say, hey, I want to connect to that, and it would come back with these scripts that were, I wouldn't ever put them directly in production, but they were pretty well production ready. So I would test them in my lab first, just to make sure. So as part of this, when we created this form, the one thing that I think could be better with a lot of these products is the prompting side. So what we did is we designed the form that you could pick a topic. A topic would say, all right, I want to write a PowerShell script. And then it would kind of give you some suggestions on what to ask. I want to connect to vCenter. I want to get a list of all the VMs that have snapshots and export it into a CSV file and kind of give it the path, and boom, there's a script. And when you start doing stuff like that, it just started blowing my mind, some of that stuff.
So,
So,
so I have two questions for you. One is, uh, when did you start? What about the time frame that you started doing it? So, like, what version of GPT? And then we can talk more about hallucinations and errors.
um,
So, what do you?
it was probably the 3.5 version is when I started getting more serious about it. Because and then I bought the membership and started looking at the API and stuff to get some of the more advanced features when they would get released. Because in my role that I do every day, I'm a huge fan of PowerShell. So to help there. But then there's times that I have to do some JavaScript or maybe some HTML or maybe some Python. Within the products, there's YAML files that get generated, or maybe I would do some Ansible playbooks. So since I'm doing such a huge range of products, and sometimes maybe I'll work with one for a week or two and you get really good at it, and then you flip over to another customer and help them. And then just to have that help by asking AI to say, hey, I want to create this Ansible playbook that goes out and does this, and it comes back with these examples, it just saves so much time.
Huge,
It's
huge.
it's huge. Yeah.
So,
And
did you upgrade to, like, you started using four GPT four, I guess, as it came out? Did you see an
yep.
improvement, or I know that some people didn't see any improvements, and you know,
Yeah, I'd say it keeps getting better. And I think when it gives you a script on how it explains why it did, or why it created the script the way it did, I think that got a lot better. I don't
hmm
know if you've
hmm
noticed that. It says, because it'll explain all the steps. It'll say, hey, we're doing this to because of this reason. And I thought the explanations got a lot better in the
hmm
newer versions.
Good point. I usually tell it no explanation needed,
Oh, yeah.
but that's it. But sometimes I don't do that, and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I got the explanation. Now I see why. It actually shows me stuff, and I don't know if that's because I'm asking more complex things or whatnot. But yeah, and especially with the latest model, the 4.0, the Omni model. I don't know if you played with that yet. Any thought? Have you tried that? Any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I've been using the latest one. That one's pretty neat. And besides writing code, which I think it does really good job, I use it to help with my writing too. I do a lot of blogging, and Doug kind of showed my blog site. But I never say just go generate this. I'll actually write the blog like I want to write it, and then I'll go into ChatGPT, or Doug will bust me on this, to use ollama sometimes. And I'll say, hey, I'm writing a technology blog. So it all comes down to that. How do you prompt? So I've learned that I'll say, hey, I'm writing this blog for a technology post. And then I find that it uses more adjectives than I would personally use. So then I'll even say, don't use a lot of adjectives. And I'll say, rephrase this, and then then it comes back with something it's close to what I wrote, but maybe just rearrange things a little bit. And then I'll usually take what it brings back to me and kind of make it more like I would write something, and use that. So I
Awesome,
I think my writing has gotten a lot better because of that.
awesome.
Or like
Totally
or
agree
like
100%.
yeah, I submitted there's that conference that I was at, the hackathon last year, is coming up again in August, and I submitted some sessions to do presentations. So I came up with the words that I wanted to use for my description to try to get it accepted. And then I, ran it by a couple different, Ollama and ChatGPT usually are my go-tos, and say, hey, rephrase it. And I would even say what I'm using. I am submitting a session for a technology conference. Keep it within 300 characters, because they do limit your descriptions, and it would come back with some stuff that just blows my mind. I'm like, that sounds
That that
pretty
that's
good.
awesome. And what you just said is basically advanced prompt engineering, which is exact. I don't use early on when I was playing with GPT and whatnot, I would go in and say, I had the mindset, oh, this is Star Wars or Star Trek. I just like, I'm more talking to a replicator or I'm talking to the holodeck. And I just have to say, I need this, this, and this, and it magically works. And then it was like, well, it's always a little weird. And then I started learning that I don't use GPT with writing as a creator. I use it as an editor. So
Right.
now I've
Yeah.
got like a PhD right. And what I also find, which is really cool, so the goofy, funny part is you can actually sit there and say, I'm trying to do blah, just like you're saying, I'm going to do this conference, I'm going to do blah, blah, blah. And then I'll say, like, you can say in the style of Shakespeare, but you could say and this is for Stephen Judd, do it in the style of Jeffrey Snover because it knows about Snover and knows about his writing. Or I'll say in the style of Bruce Payette, right? And I've actually had it do conversations with itself. I want you to talk about this topic in PowerShell, have Bruce Payette respond to Snover and Snover to respond to Payette. And it's like, oh, wow. And then I feel like I've seen them for 15 years. So it gets really interesting. So that's an event. That's the mindset that we need to get towards. So do you see ollama being, and I got to be honest, full disclosure, I think LLMs are going to be, they're commodities almost already. They're going to be improving and they're going to make them bigger. They're going to make them smaller, but that's not where the special sauce is in my mind, especially when you look at something like GitHub Copilot. So asking, is this LLM better? Claude 3.5 just came out today, right, from Anthropic. So yeah, and it's like, oh, it's blown the doors off of everything. Of course it has. And next week, Mistral's going to come out with something, and in 2 weeks, it's going to be GPT from OpenAI. So how do you see, what differences do you see, or why do you go drop into ollama?
I go to ollama because it's more local, just to kind of see how that works.
Yeah.
Something I think that's cool about ollama is if you go off the grid and you still want something to help you, I have a MacBook Pro with an M1, so it's not even the latest version. I can have ollama on there with, several different LLMs, and I could be sitting out in the middle of the mountains somewhere with no snow coverage at all, and be writing, and get into your writing mind and start asking these questions to generate code or take what I write and say, hey, help me a little bit with this. And that's what I think is cool about the ollama piece. Or I I do work with customers that their employers are blocking ChatGPT
Mhm.
and because they don't want it to go out. So if you just keep everything more local, I think it's still a great use case that you can get that help. You're you're still responsible for what is getting generated. If somebody says, "Oh, I created Ollama or ChatGPT did that," I'm sorry. No, you still have to understand what what is getting generated. It'll help you, but if you take code from AI and use it and don't understand what it's doing, then shame on you. You know, he's
And
he's
and I
still
I said that from last year, like I stopped using Google and Stack Overflow. But years before Gen AI got this good, I would sit there and you don't walk up to Stack Overflow and go, oh, look, they checked this off as the answer, and I'm going to copy paste that and push it to production. It's just not going to happen. It's not a responsible way. And AI is just basically a PhD intern that has read everything and whatnot, but it's going to make mistakes as well. It's not this magical. So I just want to look at Pete's into the local LLM stuff too. So I decided this afternoon to add an example using Ollama with the transcripts. Awesome. I think you sent me one with Ollama. Cool. Yeah, he sent me one today about using Gemini with that. So it's pretty slick. Clem says, are you then running it inside Docker, or do you have it loaded directly on your main PC, or perhaps loaded in Hyper-V? I think you said you had it on your Mac.
I have it just directly right on my Mac laptop. You go out to the Ollama website, you install it just like any other application. And after you get it installed, you just say Ollama run Llama 3. And if the
Done.
LLM's not on your laptop, it pulls it down. It's smart enough to go, hey, it's not here. I'm going to pull it down. And within within 5 minutes, you could take, without having to alarm at all, you can pull it down, run that one command, it'll pull down the LLM, and you can start asking questions.
That's
And
now when you saying that, like, because up until now, it's like, oh, here's all the steps you got to do to get your this new LLM down. But that sounds really simple. So you have the M1 chip. Does
yeah,
that play well into in terms of performance? How slow is Ollama? Or, since it needs MPUs or GPUs or TPUs for
On my
inference.
MacBook Pro, the M1 version is probably a little bit better than like an Air. I have a MacBook Air with an M1 and it's not usable. Now my MacBook Pro, that is my work computer, works great. My wife has a MacBook Air with the M2 and it works awesome.
So
So,
the
so
M2.
there's definitely some work pretty good. And I have an older laptop that's running an Intel processor, and I tried it on that, and yeah, it doesn't work at all.
When you say it doesn't work at all, what do you just prompt it and it never comes back, or does it even
Oh,
start
it
up?
just comes back like a couple letters at a time. Yeah, it's not good.
So it's like
Um,
the old 300 baud modems when we're
yeah,
downloading JPEGs, whatever the heck,
yeah,
one
yeah,
line at a time as it draws.
yeah. So you definitely need to have something that, because of the new, well, a lot of new laptops now have the GPUs and stuff built in. So and the NPUs and stuff
Yeah,
are
the
going to be built
NPUs.
into them. So it's going to get better.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
for sure.
waiting for it at first. Like, I think I was chatting with, I think Pete sent me something this morning. We were talking about the Snapdragon pieces, and I'm super psyched about the Copilot PC, even with all the drama around it. Um, but I was looking at MPUs last year, and I was like, I'm not going to pull the trigger on this yet. I can't believe they're well baked in. But by next year, late next year, all these things running, and with the new stuff out of Microsoft, with the Phi 3s and all these whatever local LLM you want to put on this, yeah, personal AI is right around the corner, if that far. And then Pete says Ollama does work with just the CPU. Awesome. Yeah. So I mean, we're 2022 is when we first saw ChatGPT Web, and here we are going into November, the next big reveal from OpenAI at their next dev conference. I can't imagine what they're gonna. Last year, Sam Altman at the end of his keynote said they'll be back this year in November, and what they're going to show this year is going to make last year look quaint. And I'm like, I'll be there. It's going to be fun times. So talking about some of the stuff did you see any of the announcements or the keynote that NVIDIA did? Just curious.
I did not.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not, dude, there is so much stuff going
It,
on.
it's yeah,
It's fire hose is not the word for it. Um,
so
but
many
yeah,
different ways to do things too.
and yeah, and with what they showed, they're also, NVIDIA is actually having AI design their next chips, or they have been, and now it's even getting next level with that. But they're talking about something called a NIM, which I think is I don't remember. Maybe somebody can chat it, like an NVIDIA inference microservice. So basically, they've experimented where they actually build entire Python 400 dependencies built into it, and then you just take that and you deploy it onto NVIDIA hardware, and it's ready to go. Interpreter all set up, and you have now like a little mini coding agent with even more capability than what OpenAI is. So I'm going to just kick you up another notch. AI announcements are not a fire hose; they are a waterfall, like Niagara. So that's a good point. So have you with OpenAI, have you worked with the tools yet? Like the file, the vector space, or with the Python code interpreter, and it probably not, but it's perfectly fine if no.
I haven't. You kind of spoiled me on the PSAI. So on the scripting side, I use your module quite a bit.
So
But
the
I
next
haven't
step,
looked at that.
I'm not going to show that tool usage tomorrow. But yeah, you can actually do hyphen tools, and then you can say enable interpreter. And when you send up your prompt, and it's one line, right? So you say, here's my prompt, send it on up to OpenAI, enable the interpreter, and what it does is it spins up Python in a sandbox. So you can actually ask it to write you Python code. And if you go into the playground, it does the same thing. So you can now, when you say, give me the first 20 numbers in Fibonacci series, if you have the interpreter enabled, AI doesn't try to infer it from its training data. It actually writes a Python program from its training data that does the Fibonacci series and then picks out the 20 first numbers. And it does it in under 2 seconds. So this is what NVIDIA is taking to the next level. And I have no idea what Microsoft's going to do by MS build time, but we're actually in Ignite. So
I did
cool,
write
man.
a I did
Mhm.
write a PowerShell function to work with ollama because they have an API that's built into their program. So I just do an API call and I can be sitting at a prompt and just say, ask ollama, and then I'll ask my question and it sends it to the function and comes back with the reply.
So when you say send it to the function, could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it just, well, I could actually demo it if you want me to.
Awesome. Demos are always good for me.
Let me get my screen ready here.
So yeah, if anybody has questions, drop them in the chat and we'll see if we can figure it out. And if we can't, we'll ask AI.
You see my screen, right?
Yeah, can you bump up the
Yeah,
font a bit?
let me make that bigger. Oops. Oh,
You're going the wrong way.
yeah.
Cool. So at least it's in PowerShell. I'm liking it. All right. So
Yeah,
this is
that's
all.
no, yeah, like I said, I'm a huge fan of PowerShell. So it's very simple. I just ask for one parameter. It says, hey, send me the question.
Mhm.
And then I can create my body and I tell it that I want to use Llama 3 and here's my question. And then it'll let you do streaming or not streaming. So I just want to send it and get the full answer. So I say streaming is false. And then I create my invoke web request and send it to my local Ollama.
Cool. Mhm.
And then it responds back as a JSON. And then I write the response back. And then in case
Cool.
I want
Put
to
it on the
use it,
clipboard.
I throw
Nice.
it into the clipboard so I can do a quick paste.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect.
well, let's just run that.
So this is running on your Mac, right? Yeah, I can
This
see
is
it.
running on my Mac.
I can see the
Yeah.
Apple.
So there I just ran. But like, some simple little questions. If we just go and now if we look at the bottom here, so I could be sitting in the middle of the mountains somewhere with no connections or anything and be asking it some questions.
You could
And
actually
it
s- be.
seems like the first time you ask a question like this, no, there it is.
It
That's not
takes
too
a
bad.
no. It
Takes
takes
a
a little bit
little
of
bit,
time.
little bit of time. And of course,
What's you got?
if I had a newer laptop like an M3 or something, I know it would go a lot quicker.
Exactly. So what about
But like
Line
here,
37 or whatnot? That's probably
yes,
faster
I
at
mean
this
like
point.
there, I'm saying I want to create a full script. I want to connect the vCenter, and if we go and run that.
So yeah, it's about 10, 15 seconds, but that's, hey, this is doing a lot of lookup and it's taking a lot.
Yeah.
Nice.
So there's
Have you
so
tried
here's
that with just GPT and see how if it's how faster or if the results are better or worse or
I do run my questions against each, like
Mhm.
here. So if we let's do this. Let's start a new chat. And I also use the Mac client on ChatGPT. I don't know
Mhm.
if people do that at all. So if I take that same question,
That's using the Omni model.
it's
So yeah, but it's streaming as well. And
yeah.
that first part is just yeah,
Now what you get is a little better visually and stuff, I think, in the
exactly.
Chat GPT instead of the Ollama, but there also is a open web UI that you can add that gives you this web interface.
Hmm.
I kind of looked at it, but I'm like, I like to keep it simple.
Hmm.
And if you really want to keep it simple with Ollama, let's just you can go as simple as let's do this.
So they have their own CLI, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
just here, let me share this. I can make that bigger.
Thanks.
Bigger. That's plus.
That's good. Cool.
There we go. But all you got to do is say, Ollama run llama 3, and
Oh, sweet.
there's
So it's like
Senator.
it's almost like running Node for a JavaScript program. Cool.
Now, there's one thing I do. I have a Stream Deck. So, talk about prompt engineering. I actually I added to my buttons on a Stream Deck. I have
Awesome.
I have these prompts. It says, all right, remember I said about I'm going to write this text for a technology blog, do not use a lot of adjectives. And then I would put in my text here that I want to ask. So very quickly I can do my
Nice.
prompts. So
Nice.
here's a prompt, like when I do demos, there's a prompt. Now you can see that's much faster
Hmm.
than when I was doing it through my PowerShell function because the program's already running. So
Plus,
that
it also might be streaming, so it's actually instead of
Yes,
waiting for everything, so stream. Yeah,
exactly. So
cool.
you're
Gotcha.
you're getting that instant gratification by seeing some of the streaming, and so that's kind of cool,
That's pretty cool.
or like here I'll say act as a Power CLI SME and
Was
Power
that a
CLI
off the
Power
Stream Deck?
yeah, that's so very quickly I can say, hey, that's stuff that I'm going to do a lot. I have buttons programmed on my Stream Deck,
Awesome.
and then it comes back very quickly. Plus, when
Awesome.
I do demos like this, it makes it so I don't have to type so fast. I can just hit these buttons and I'm good to go.
That's that's a really creative use of it. I really like that.
But to have
Uh,
a yeah, to have a Stream Deck, if you come up with prompts that work for you, and that
mhm.
same prompt, because of using the Stream Deck, if I come over here to ChatGPT and I put in that same prompt, because if I say act as a SME, once you figure out what you want to do, it just makes it very consistent.
Absolutely agreed.
So
So
For,
other
for
Dave also, he had just had a question. Any tips for periodic maintenance or tweaking of Olama?
um I mean, they do come out with updates to the program pretty often, and then you'll usually see at the top of the screen here with like right here, it says restart the update,
And that's
and
it.
they're every couple days. And then if new, I do keep an eye on for their website to see if new LLMs become available, and I've been testing different ones. Like the Llama 3, I use probably the most. I know Microsoft has their one, and then there's some from Hugging Face that are specific to PowerShell and stuff that are supposed to help a little bit better in those areas. And I've been just looking around the different one, which that's one thing with Ollama that kind of gives you that ability to test different LLMs too, which is kind of neat.
So you
Um,
can actually not just point. So it handles multiple LLMs, like
oh
from
yeah,
any vendor. Awesome. Mhm.
it's if I go out to the Ollama website and just get one that I never used before. I got the live demos here. So
Yep.
if we go
Doing
out
good.
and if we go and let's just go pick a model. So
So it does have the Microsoft, the Phi 3s and the Mistrals from
yeah,
France. Awesome. And Gemma
Gem-
from Google.
I don't think I've used this. So then what it does here is it even says Ollama runs Gemma. So if you
Oh,
copy it,
nice.
so if I come
Nice.
back to my prompt, so if I say buy, which will close the one that it's running now. Oops. If I just take what I put in the clipboard and say
So
Ollama.
it's almost like a Docker image, right?
Yeah, so now it says, all right, Gemma's not there. I'm gonna go pull it down for you. And this
Sweet.
is 5 gig. This is gonna take a
A
little bit,
bit.
but that's what's cool about it. This will go pretty quick. If you never used it before, all I said was Olama run Gemma, and it's gonna come pull it down, and then it's gonna take you right to a prompt.
And
Now,
then the good part too is that so Gemma and Ollama 3 and GPT, they all have different ways that you send data up, right? It has a different construct and has a different construct when it returns the response. So they've kind of abstracted that away. So once again, it's all about prompt engineering and not worrying about the mechanics.
yeah. For me, that's my focus and my interest is to become a really good prompt engineer. And I
Exactly.
and I know you gave the link to my blog post or my blog site, but I I did do one on ollama that I kind of talk about how I use it and stuff. So if anybody on here wants to go look and have some little videos and stuff that I learned. And I even have
Yes.
that code that I was showing, I put that out there. So
Awesome.
something that you can go look at.
So
But yeah,
Tyson
if
has
I
a
was going to
question.
go out,
Okay.
my wife and I would go camping and stuff, in Pennsylvania. It's out in the middle of nowhere. I would go get a couple of these LLMs, put on my laptop, and go out in the middle of nowhere.
Prompting
That's
in nature.
yes.
Oh, that'd be a good series. So Tyson says, does Ollama only work on Mac and Linux at the moment?
No, it's Windows too.
It's Windows based as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Clem says there is a Windows preview page where you should be able to download Ollama. Yep. So, and on that note, and there's a there's a new Visual Studio extension. I think it's
Yeah.
called, is
I
it?
seen that.
Yeah. So I think it does similar to this, and you can plug it into Studio. I forget what it's called, AI Dev Kit, something like that. And you install that. It's free. You put it in your Visual Studio Code, and it does a bunch of things. I think you can even use it to train and fine tune any of the models out there. So the good news about this is, learning about, again, LLMs, in my opinion, are going to be commodities, right? Because as you can see, what Dale's doing, it's like, oh, I want to grab the Gamma. That's the latest model from Google. You don't really have to know that, right? You can look at leaderboards, you can look at different things, you can experiment with different ones. All you have to do is have an M1 chip or an M4 chip or an MPU, and you're off to the races. Don't try to use it with the old Intel hardware. That's never going to fly. But awesome. That's awesome.
And this new Chat GPT client, I don't remember if that's available on the Windows yet. I know it is on Mac. They do some cool stuff
Oh
here
yeah.
for people that
Oh,
want
you
to
mean
play
like
around.
if you're in the web, it's
No,
also
this isn't a web page. This is an
that's the
app.
local. Yeah.
That's yeah, this is also running. Now it's going out to the web to get the information,
Mhm.
but this is running local and you can you can take screenshots or and then send it to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, summarize this
Mhm.
screenshot for me" or something, and it does a pretty good job there too.
I've
So,
actually taken screenshots of PowerPoint demos that I see people do, and
hmm,
I like the fonts and I like the stuff they did inside. I'll paste it into GPT and say, what font did they use and how did they get those boxes that in that hand drawing thing? And it gets it not only correct, but it'll also give me a link where I can download them to work with it in PowerShell. So for me, it's like, wow. And Clem has said that it's called AI Toolkit from Microsoft. He believes is the VS Code extension. Yeah. So yeah, everybody, that's awesome stuff, man. That is
and since I'm sharing, let me just show you what I did at the hackathon. If
please.
people are interested. So this is the application. This is called RE Automation. And it's kind of where I live and what I help customers with. So we created this. Um, you have these custom forms. Just to show you real quick, like if you're going to do server builds and stuff, you can ask questions. CPU, memory. How do you want to build it? So my thought with this was, hey, if I'm living in here as a developer and I'm creating these custom automation and stuff, I don't want to really leave the program or whatever. So my thought was, I'll just have this form that comes into here and it says, all right, what do you want to do? So we developed this form that says, all right, I want to write PowerShell. So you pick a topic and then we go out and say, all right, I want to create a Power CLI script. And then we kind of went through these steps and it starts building the prompt. It says, I want to connect the vCenter. I want to get all the VMs that have a snapshot. And then if you want to export it as a CSV, so it's my thoughts were to help people become those prompt engineers. So, and then if you want to, edit this after the prompts kind of helps build the prompt, or these drop downs help build the prompt, you can edit it if you want. And then as soon as I start the conversation, this is where this sends it to that PowerShell script. It's like 6 lines of code because I'm using PSAI to do the work for me. So I take this prompt, I send it out to ChatGPT, and it's going to come back with the code and put it into this other little window.
GPT. I think they're upgrading their servers, but yeah.
And I do notice around noontime some days it seems to get a little slower.
I'm
So
glad you said that because I'm not the only one. It's like, oh, they're coming up with a new release of something.
everybody goes to them, and there it is. So
Hey,
there's that code, and I thought it was kind of a neat way to get people started on the prompting and how to properly prompt.
that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, first
So
it
like,
does the heavy lifting, and you don't have to think about stuff, right?
when I was saying like all the different languages and stuff, if I'm saying, hey, I want to now work with Ansible, so then you come in here and it kind of clears out the prompt and says, what do you want to do? I want to convert this Ansible playbook to salt, so
Mhm.
then here's an example. So if I say no on so it clears the bottom and says, all right, here's a playbook that I know that works, but I want to convert it over to like a salt state file. So when I flip that over to yes, it's going to send that out to ChatGPT and bring it back. Because lots of times the stuff that I work with, I see a lot of examples in curl. And I'm
Mhm.
like, well, I want that to be PowerShell because I'm a PowerShell guy. So I'll just go into, Chat GPT or something, and I'll say, convert this curl command over to PowerShell. And it does a pretty awesome job.
So did you see any challenges with this in terms of, so I see, so the conversation, the prompt that you do, is that like pre-canned or is that also GPT generated? You
These
know what I'm saying?
prompts,
The one where it says conversation, when is that
oh, this,
the first, no, the first box,
this
conversation?
box,
Is that pre-gen, like, do you have that part of the app or is that pull, or are you querying GPT?
for the hackathon, because we didn't have a lot of time, we just created a database with prompts that we knew that worked.
Cool.
So what these drop downs are doing is reaching into a database. My my ultimate goal that I wanted to do this year for the hackathon, I don't know if I'll do it or not, is to have it work like if you go to Amazon and you start shopping and you're saying, hey, I want to buy a new laptop, if you start typing words like, hey, I want to write this PowerShell script, that if you have this database of proven prompts, that it would start giving you these examples. And then if you see one that you want, you could click on it and then maybe make a slight change to it. Because
Totally.
like, well, just like the app here, the chat, they don't give you anything to get started. So, if I start typing PowerShell,
Uh,
it doesn't really do anything to
Right.
help you. And
Right.
I would love to see a program that would work more like my lab area, that when you start typing things, it helps you be a really good prompt engineer.
And then at that point, you've got a list of curated prompts that you know will give certain kind of direction and answers that you know that you as well as others can use. So
Yeah.
Clem says that's getting into the idea of Dan's fabric. We're crowdsourcing prompts to help build. Yep, that's exactly what Dan is doing. Hey, can I just take the screen for a minute?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
That was awesome. So I'm not trying to outdo anybody.
Nope. We're all
Um,
friends here.
some of us, yes, we are. So, so to Clem's point about Dan's piece, so I have something called, let's see if I can do it. Like I can say something like, I want to promote my PSAI PSM1, right? And then I'm going to pipe it to Weave, right? Which is like Fabric. And then if you hit Control Space, these are all of my curated prompts. And one of them I have is called Post to X. So now I'm piping that question into Weave, and a Post to X is a prompt similar to what you're doing. And here's what I can come up. It starts with, right? We just launched PSA1, AI, whatnot. And if I wanted to, I could further then take it down and say, which I won't, I'll just show the, and you have all different types of things that you can work with, like extract ideas from that or extract, well, we can do that. Let's see what happens. I don't know, I haven't done this one. But again, it's just taking one prompt after another, and then anything that you hit, when you type in Weave and you hit Control Space, these are curated prompts similar to what Dale was showing, and this is based off of what Dan was doing as well. So there's a bunch of ideas, right? So I took them, I said, this is what I want to promote. give me a post, and then the post went down to extract ideas, and then that's what the ideas that extracted from that simple post. Yeah, so this whole prompt management, getting started, how do you use it? You don't want to keep typing these things in. In fact, I think I have something called Get Weave. Did I call it that? Get Weave content. And again, so let's see. This is the actual prompt, right? Starts with a pound identity. So it's giving GPT a way to identify sections. There's the identity section, the steps, and the output. And you extract surprising, insightful, and interesting information, extract 20 to 50 of the most surprising ones, and then the outputs are only do markdown. I want 20 ideas. Now, if you were to sit here and type this in over and over and over again, it's never going to happen, right? So having it curated and having it in a place that makes your life easy is what the game is all about. So yeah, your approach is amazing. And it's definitely in alignment with where it's going. And I'd love to see what you're thinking about doing with the Amazon style, because that's where we
Yeah,
definitely need to get to.
it's on my list of things to, it's a hobby for me to do that kind of stuff, and it just blows my mind what it can do. And I
Things to
mean, some
do
of that,
in the forest. Go ahead.
some of that really isn't AI type work, is just developing this nice UI to talk to AI. So I think that's important. And I think
Great point.
people sometimes it seems like they're more worried about what the results are, but you got to make it user friendly too. That's a goal that I have.
That goes back to my statement about LLMs are going to be commodities. It's all about the
Mm,
user experience, right? And that's what GPT is doing. That's what Microsoft's doing with their playground in the Azure OpenAI services. That's what Ollama is doing for developers. Like, hey, you want to test your prompts against 5, 10, 15 LLMs? We're going to give you that space to do it. And here's how easy it can be. And yeah, you have to get comfortable with the results. But then again, just like every LLM that you look at, it always has that disclaimer. Make sure you check what this
yeah,
says.
yeah,
And if you
yeah.
don't, well, it's like grabbing stuff off of Stack Overflow. But that's awesome. Awesome. Uh, yeah,
And
what I would get.
it's amazing, like when you pull down those LLMs local. Like the Llama 3, it's 4.8 gig. And to get that much, I can go out there and say who won the World Series in 1960, and boom, it's gonna know. Or who won the Super Bowl 10, boom, it's gonna, who was the scores? Or if you go, hey, the World Series, show me the games, the scores of every game, and and it has all that in such a small file. That's the part that I don't dig into, that side of AI, because that's for all the data scientists. So I just want to be able to prompt better. But it is amazing what they're doing with such small files.
The recent one I asked was show all the Hungarian scientists that helped build the Manhattan Project. Put their birth dates in and what their contributions were, and put it in a table. And it goes through Oppenheimer, it goes through Einstein's influence, it goes through Slizzard's, and it just goes one after the other. And I'm like, and then you can ask wacky, I ask wacky things like, what was going on culturally in their part of the world when this happened? And it starts to give me information about that. Again, I'm not a historian. I'm not going to sit there and take that and publish an article on it, but because I sit back and go, wow, that's just amazing what I can dig into. But
Yeah,
it is about the user experience.
when you and I were in school, Doug,
Dude.
we would go and have I remember my parents had this bookcase with the encyclopedia, you know, and to take that information plus so much more, it's like every newspaper published, and every sports score, and shove that into a 4.8 gigabyte file. That is effing amazing.
Dude, we used to have to use encyclopedias and go to a building
Yeah,
and get
right,
books.
right.
And now it's like I can ask a question about, Rome and compare that to the modern day society and ask it to come up with analysis about that. And whether I, agree with it or not, but there's a joke. I'm gonna have to cut this out when I post this. We had encyclopedias, but my father had to sell the encyclopedia set because my mother knew everything. So we got So
But just
some of
think
us
of a
still.
student, let's say if schools are blocking stuff like chat GPT, but some kid's smart enough to put ollama on their little laptop and they're sitting there in class doing the local stuff and they're like getting all these answers correct. You don't have to have that internet access. So there's just so many options and
And
it's good times.
I think
Yeah.
I just saw, yeah, they were trying to shut it down, like they couldn't use it for homework and all that, and they even pushed and lobbied heavily against OpenAI to come up with something that could identify if a student was using it for doing essays and whatnot. And they came up with something because they, okay, we'll try and placate you. And of course, it was useless because this, oh, if you just change it this, or like what you said about how you do your writing, you ask a question, you ask for a rephrase, that, this, that, the other, it doesn't give the standard response, right? But yeah, now they've gotten rid of all that. It's like, no, you have to learn how to teach teachers and you have to learn how to teach students how to use this tool so you can take it to the next level. And there's some just amazing stuff inside of it. And it's amazing at programming in SQL, right? Or any kind of programming language. It's just astonishing if you know how to prompt. And it's tough
Right.
to learn how to prompt. In fact, I saw today that somebody was kidding around really good in the space, said, I'm no longer a prompt engineer, I'm a prompt scientist. So it's like, oh, okay. I don't know what the hell that means, but I'll watch that for a minute. Clem
That
also
just means it
said,
pays more.
hey, I'll put that on my resume.
Prompt scientist.
Um, so Clem says some of us still have a physical library card.
Yeah.
I guess that's a congratulations. I don't know. Yeah, this stuff is and I'm going to go back to what I demoed early on, but not to, this whole new agentic workflows, are next level, like that you can actually, because of function calling, and which is different than us function calling that we know it. But when you start to wrap your head around it, and it's going to get easier and easier to work with, and there'll be better toolkits and SDKs. They're already coming out. Being able to plug that stuff in or spin things up or have the LLM generate those pieces for you to plug in. And the LLM takes on a whole different capability. So yeah, and with all the announcements between OpenAI, then Google I/O, then MS Build, and then Apple, and then NVIDIA, and we're only in June. So the waterfall or fire hose is upon us. So cool. Um, Anything else? Any other questions? Any place you want to end up?
No, just thanks for having me on this call,
Thanks for
and
coming on.
it's always good to chat and
Definitely. I enjoy
cool
chatting.
stuff.
Oh yeah, this is the future. We
You
should
know the
maybe get together at the end of the year, like in November, or like November, December, or January, after OpenAI drops their next bomb
Yeah,
and says, "Hey, look at where we're going with this stuff," and then see what we think.
I know Doug and I were talking before we had left the people on the call. I've been in IT for a while. I told him earlier, I said there's two things that really changed, my career and stuff. One, since I'm in virtualization, when I see my first vMotion, where you can take a running VM and go from one physical server to another, it was kind of like blew my mind. I'm like, that's so awesome, and that just took off. This is probably the second thing. There's been a lot of stuff in between, but the way it can help do programming, because my focus is so automation driven now with companies, to be able to teach them how to write scripts and do automation. But it's amazing when I talk to all these big companies and I'll say, hey, are you looking at chat GPT or anything? And they're like, no, they're not.
Really, really,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give them a couple examples, like what we just showed. I'll say, hey, look at this. And then they're like, they kind of, you can see they're kind of thinking,
something happens.
yeah.
Do they go off and say, how can I get GPT in my space, or how can I start working with LLMs, or they just their brains
Um,
explode and that's it?
I kind of explain things a little bit, but then sometimes they're like, well, I can't get to it at work. And if I worked somewhere personally that blocked that, I would have an iPad or a laptop or something beside me, and I'd have something that I would still be able to go out and use it.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Uh,
So you just so there's a woman, her name is Carmen Simon. She's a neuroscientist, And she's put out her second book was recently, and her first book, it took her 4 years to publish, and her second one, the same thing. And because what she does is she gets people who, to be participants in her studies, and she puts like an EEG on their head so she can measure how the brain is working, and she puts galvanizers on the skin to see if their skin reacts to what they're watching the presenter do. She puts there's things that track the eyes, the body movement, all this kind of stuff. And one of the things she does is she says, she baselines it by having them look at a beige wall, right? And look at that for 10 minutes. And then they just get all the kind of readings and whatnot. And then they go into where they have a presenter, one of us, and either we have a picture like an ollama behind us. That's why I have one that's fuzzied out, because people tend to focus on the presenter and not the background. And she goes through all these scenarios. If all the people are on a Zoom call, if half of them are in the office and half at home, if some are on the phone, if they're all this or all that, and takes years to collect all this data, and she goes through different kinds of slides and studies. Anyway, so because of the internet, it's amazing. I found, she's on LinkedIn. So I followed her, and people started raving about her book. And I would jump in and say, I'm using it for this and this, amazing, amazing. And then I said, I would love to have some of the images that you have so I could have it locally so I could see them better and use them in my presentations. And so she said, send me an email, I'll send you what I can. And then we started having a conversation. And I responded to her. I said, just want to let you know, when I get on the internet, when I get on ChatGPT, I ground the ChatGPT and I say, do you know who Carmen Simon is? And it comes back, yes. And I go, do you know her latest book? And it usually gets the first one and not the second. So I say, no, her new book, Made You Look. I want to come up with these. I want to talk about this topic, kind of like what we were showing before. I want to talk about this topic, but do it in the style of Carmen Simon and her neuroscience work. So I told her I did that. And she's working with OpenAI and whatnot to put her research into the database so that we can then improve our presentation styles, transitions, images, and whatnot. So the point is, she sent me another piece saying they just did a study. She gave me the study that's not public, and it was all about how sales coaches will typically take their job is that every quarter they sit with their salespeople and they have one-on-one role playing, right? So the salesperson say, I don't want to buy your product. And then that new salesperson or medium intermediate one will start to talk about how he wants to make that person buy the product. And then the senior salesperson on the call will then coach them better ways to do this, talk about that. And she said they set it up with a senior salesperson, a junior salesperson, an AI expert in the space, and a beginner AI. And then she studied like a few hundred people. And what they're finding out is that people respond unbelievably well to both the AI expert and even the beginner because they don't feel like they're going to be judged. They're not going to get like, oh, I can't believe you're asking a question like, and I was thinking like code reviews, right? So, but this whole space of having AI being a coach, similar to what you're saying, why not have these kinds of, how do you set up the prompts? How do you set up these types of things so people can use them, interact and learn and be, focused in on what they're trying to do. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. So Matrix says GTP5 will say Doug Fink's an actor on Star Trek because of this meetup. I'm not acting, dude. I'm on the holodeck as we speak. So I hope GPT-5 gets it right.
Well, how
And
do you know this is really me, Doug? Maybe I
I,
wrote an AI to represent myself during this whole call.
I'm a firm believer in that we are a simulation. So I am 1000% behind that. My problem is I can't find the knobs and dials to up my avatar work. Yeah, this whole space is absolutely fascinating. And yeah, it takes a lot of time. So how long did you take, and we can close up on this, but how long did it take you to I know I initially was like, oh, this thing doesn't know shit about my import Excel module back in 22. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to train my own model. I'm gonna have to do some fine tuning. And then as they improved the training on GPT-3.5, and then I started learning how to do better prompting, I was like, oh, I can elicit certain time. It knows about stuff, but there's a way that you have to go after it. So where was your frustration and what helped you push through? And how did you learn that, if that's makes sense?
Um, Boy, I don't know if I ever really was frustrated. I would ask questions, and sometimes I would get replies that I knew was just wrong. Sometimes certain, like, I remember asking a lot of questions about creating salt state files, and it just could not get them right. And I'm like, yeah, it just doesn't know. So I just kind of have the attitude it's going to get better, and if it can help me a little bit, great. So
And then how, and you just basically stuck with it and said, oh, this prompting is really the way. Did
just
you make a lot? Did you have a remembrance of like, oh, you switched over, like prompt engineering is the way?
I would keep, yeah, I would, yeah, that's, yeah. And when I find prompts that I know work well, that's where I kind of keep track of that. I have a note and stuff, or I can put it into
Put
my,
it on the stream deck?
put it in the stream deck and say, hey, this way I can repeat it every time. And
Absolutely.
so that's, no, I, I enjoy technology so much that, I know it's never going to be perfect. And so I can't say I really got frustrated.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to have the old rule of I would put a piece of new technology on my box, and if I didn't, I'd play with it. And if I didn't touch it for it's consistently for 7 days, um, I would delete it. I would like, okay, it doesn't really work the way I want to. I don't really understand it. I don't have the time for it. But when I started seeing GPT, it was like, wow, this thing is just, and I don't care if it gives me the right answer. Just being able to have this kind of interaction with a piece of software. Were you around in the days? See, now I'm going to take it longer. Were you around in the days when when we started working with expert systems and neural nets and whatnot? You probably were, but it wasn't coming up on the radar then.
No.
Yeah, the expert systems, it was like just those were back in the days when it was a big if statement, right? Like somebody would type something in and then it would be like, well, if it says has this keyword in it or this word, go down this path, and then it would then unbundle into a bunch of more if statements, right? So, and they started calling those expert systems and they were pretty useful. But yeah, we've come such a long way since then. So it's awesome.
And
All
the
right.
if people haven't played around with the app for the Chat GPT app on your phones, I have an
Mhm.
iPhone, so I have the app. If you go into the mode where you can talk to it, that is starting to blow my mind too. You know,
Dude,
like Siri and stuff, just not that great. But
yeah,
when
you
you
can
go
say
into
it. It
Chat
sucks. It sucks.
when you go into Chat GPT and you go into the talking mode and you start asking questions, and whichever voice you pick comes back, it's like having that conversation. Um, it's pretty amazing then when you close the voice part, and then all the text that you said and what it replied is there for you. That's pretty neat too. Yeah.
So I almost on it every morning when I have a shortcut to that. Sweet. So that's what Steve says. Um, so this is the one I have an Android, right? So I just brought up the Chat GPT. I'm gonna just turn it on and we're gonna put it into connecting mode, and there it's
Yeah, that right
connected.
there. That's what I'm referring to.
Okay, be brief. No, be brief.
You're welcome. If you have any other questions or need assistance with anything, feel free to ask.
Summarize how cool PowerShell is in one sentence. You're doing upgrades.
PowerShell is a versatile and powerful scripting language that simplifies task automation and configuration management, making it essential for IT professionals.
Yeah,
Now
that's amazing. The voice
that
is so clear and
Sorry,
so
I'm having
human-like,
issues right now.
you know.
Did not understand what you said.
okay, shut up. Um, not you. Uh,
Yeah.
and if you saw the recent announcements when they just did, they have now you can interrupt it, and you probably heard about the drama with Scarlett Johansson. That one of the
Yes,
voices, Sky, supposedly sounds like her, whatever it is.
right.
But the nuance, and like now to the other day, this thing said, "Hey, it's giving me an answer," and then it stopped, and I said, "That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for this direction," and it came back and said, "Ah, I see what you're talking about. Like, where did that come from?" So now it's like this whole, and by November, it's going to be off the charts, and we'll have access to that inside of PowerShell or any of other programming languages. Um, it's a whole different way of, it's totally different, and I think it's the next level. Dale, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I hope we can have some more. Maybe we'll schedule one for after the next big thing.
And thanks to everybody for joining that's on the
Yeah.
call.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
All right.
Later.